15 November 2000 was the year of Bihar and Jharkhand separation. 15 days ago, another separation happened. This was the state of Chhattisgarh separating from Madhya Pradesh. Chhattisgarh, for its own history and cultural heritage, had very valid reasons to separate. This video delves into each and every reason of those, from cultural, social, economical, land rights, and many more. So, why exactly did Chhattisgarh separate? Was the separation necessary? What were the set of movements that led to this separation? Stay tuned till the very end. To understand why Chhattisgarh separated, we need to start much earlier, right from pre-independent India. Chhattisgarh had a very distinct cultural identity. It was known as Dakshin Khosla. It was ruled by various different kings known as the Kalachuris and Satavahanas. This region had its own political traditions, its own dialects, and a cultural ecosystem which is influenced strongly by tribal communities. After the British reorganized the central provinces, Chhattisgarh, despite its unique history, was merged into a larger administrative unit. Post-independence, the independent Indian government introduced the State Reorganization Act of 1956. In this act too, Chhattisgarh was merged with Madhya Pradesh despite the linguistic and cultural distinction. However, the Chhattisgarhis or citizens of Chhattisgarh did not identify themselves with it because the dialect was very different from that in Malwa, Bundelkhand of Madhya Pradesh. The tribal population of Chhattisgarh, mainly the Gond, Haiba, Baiga, Kamar, they form a large and culturally rich demographic. Folk arts, festivals, food, and traditions of the state also differ significantly. So, for decades, people in the region felt that their region's cultural identity was overshadowed inside a much larger state. The sense of being distinct yet not recognized became one of the earliest emotional reasons which led to the separation. Chhattisgarh is often called the mineral heartland of India. It holds 18% of India's coal, 20% of India's iron ore, 35% of India's tin ore, large reserves of bauxite, limestone, dolomite, and some of India's densest forests. Yet, despite its natural wealth, the region remained one of the least developed parts of Madhya Pradesh for decades. Residents believe that even though Chhattisgarh generated enormous revenue, especially from mineral extraction, forestry, and power generation, the money flowed outwards, primarily benefiting the western and northern regions of MP. So the part which is today Madhya Pradesh was the one benefiting, and Chhattisgarh region, which was east-south of integrated Madhya Pradesh, that did not benefit. So this was a economic rationale which led to frustration. Then there was neglect of infrastructure. By the 1980s and 90s, observers widely pointed out on infrastructure gaps. Rail connectivity was weak despite presence of heavy industries. Rural roads remained underdeveloped. Irrigation coverage was minimal even though the region is drained by the Mahanadi and several other rivers. Now this is a rarity that despite very good rivers, despite everything, irrigation was very poor. So clearly the government at the center of integrated Madhya Pradesh was neglecting their interests. At least that's what the citizens felt. So access to higher education and medical institutions also lagged behind because main centers like Bhopal, Indore had all of these, and of course there was a preferential treatment given over there. So the residents of Chhattisgarh argue that the region's development potential was ignored by successive Madhya Pradesh governments because of its distance from Bhopal and lack of political influence. So you can see the similarity over here between Madhya Pradesh Chhattisgarh as well as Bihar Jharkhand. So the separation starts with same kind of disgust. So initially it is socio-economic culture, then it becomes economic, and then it thinks really further. So let's see how it happens here also. There was a huge industrial potential in Chhattisgarh. The Bhilai steel plant was set up in 1955 with Soviet assistance. It became a symbol of industrial progress. It showed what Chhattisgarh could achieve. But outside Bhilai and Raipur, the industries were very few. Despite vast mineral deposits, processing industries were not created locally. Raw materials were left to the states, but finished industries did not arrive in proportion. Many local leaders argued that if Chhattisgarh were a separate state, we could attract industries and develop further. The sentiment grew stronger as comparisons with smaller, efficiently governed states like Gujarat or Haryana were made. A large portion of Chhattisgarh's population belongs to tribal communities. Yet the tribal belt suffered from poor education access, malnutrition, lack of healthcare facilities, exploitation by outsiders in forests and mining, administrative neglect due to long distance from Bhopal. So activists argued that the separate state government could focus exclusively on tribal welfare. So this was the starting point for separation from activism perspective. So instead of being overshadowed by the needs of more populated regions of MP, a separate state could help them focus on their interests, their priorities, their economic, social and development. The vast size of Madhya Pradesh also created governance challenges. Chhattisgarh was hundreds of kilometers away from Bhopal. The administrative services, the movement of files and decision making were very slow. So this is a typical problem of any large state. A lot of experts also say that Uttar Pradesh is facing similar challenges. And one of the reasons why even Uttarakhand and Uttar Pradesh separated because the culture was different and even administrative was going to be challenged. In fact, Uttar Pradesh today also is too large a state for one state government to manage. Madhya Pradesh back then was the largest state and the need for division intensified because that was the era of division. Even Bihar Jharkhand movement was intensifying. Even UP Uttarakhand movement was intensifying. There were a very large rise in regional identity movements. In the 1970s and 80s, several local groups formed and emphasized that a regional pride and need for statehood is less important. The most important amongst them was the Chhattisgarh Rajya Sangharsh Samiti. This unified local voices across parties and districts. The prominent leaders emerged to consistently raise the demand in legislative assembly and in parliament. Shama Sharan Shukla argued that Chhattisgarh backwardness report. Chandulal Chandarkar amplified the demand of a nationally as well as Congress MP. Ajit Jogi, he was one of the strongest modern advocates for statehood. These builders built political momentum and united people across districts. During the late 1990s, India saw renewed push for creating smaller and more manageable states. As I mentioned earlier, there were parallel things going on. Bihar Jharkhand, UP Uttarakhand, and many others were in talks. So this momentum was something which all political leaders love to catch into. So if something is a trend, they like to get their things done in that period of time because in politics, timing is everything. So the demand for Jharkhand and Uttarakhand was also gaining traction, and central government under Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee supported the idea of decentralization. So Vajpayee ji was a clear person who said that the more focused a state is, the better it would be. Anything which is difficult to manage, it is better to divide the responsibilities. So he was a man who believed in decentralization in a big way. And that's what explains a lot of these state divisions that happened during his first tenure as the Prime Minister. So in this atmosphere, Chhattisgarh movement finally aligned with the national political will and it made statehood possible. Please bear in mind that this was not a violent struggle. Unlike Jharkhand and Bihar, which was a fairly violent struggle because the then Chief Minister of Bihar was not willing to let this go, MP-Chattisgarh was a relatively smoother transition. There was not a very big resistance from Madhya Pradesh also because even they realized that it is in the best interest that both of them separate and manage independence point. After becoming a separate state, Chhattisgarh witnessed significant transformation. The first one was the creation of Naya Raipur. This was India's one of the most administratively planned capitals. There was boost to industry like power, steel, cement, agro processing and many others. Tribal welfare became the center of everything and schemes like public distribution scheme for food and other reforms like healthcare, they reached remote districts. Agriculture improvement also took place. Chhattisgarh became a rice producer with better irrigation and procurement policies. Focused government enabled that with a smaller population and targeted administration, decision making became faster and more responsive. Overall, the statehood gave Chhattisgarh the administrative freedom and political will to focus on its own needs. Chhattisgarh's separation from Madhya Pradesh was not a one-time thing. It was not just merely a border change, it was a lot more than that. When a person loses his right or senses the fear of attack on his culture, he changes. When a person feels deprived of his economic rights, he changes. When a person feels the future of his children is not the same, he changes. That's why historically you have seen why joint families have given way to nuclear families. Something same evolves in a very large scale when a state decides to separate. It's always in the best interest that two people stay separate but remain cordial with each other rather than staying together and struggle. Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, and many other states' separation was born on the same idea. And kudos to Prime Minister Atal Bihar Vajpayee for respecting this opinion. Thank you very much for watching. Please comment your opinion on the comment